What's going on, everybody? Thank you so much for coming back to another video. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about Saw 6. If you guys have not already done so, hit that subscribe button down below. I'd love for you guys to be a part of what's going on here on this channel and all the great content I got coming out very, very soon. Also, hit that like button. Definitely helps the channel out. And get ready to start commenting your thoughts on the 6th installment in the Saw franchise. Like a lot of the other films in the franchise, we open up with a trap. In this case, we have two individuals in a trap. The movie touches on some healthcare issues as far as, like, I think it was kind of making reference to what was going on in the real world, just unaffordable or kind of attempts at affordable healthcare, but that are not 100% affordable. And we have these two people who I believe they kind of give out loans to people that they know they can't fully pay, and they think they're going to kind of get in return from these people who can't pay loans is kind of more than the people are kind of gaining. So you have these two people that are in pretty, shady kind of work that are now in this trap. And like a lot of Saw traps, you have to kind of give in order to get. And in this case, you obviously have to give to be able to get out. We have these two people with kind of contraptions on their heads that have screws going into their heads. They have a timer and they have scales that they need to start chopping off parts of their body and throwing stuff onto these scales. You have a fat dude that's part of the mix who starts chopping up his stomach and starts throwing it on there. You think he's going to be the clear-cut winner. And then the girl in the situation ends up starting to cut her whole arm off and throws that on the scale, winning the situation. And then we get that classic Saw title card, Saw 6. Yeah, this for me, when I look at the film in and of itself on an overall level, is probably one of the more memorable installments in the franchise. I think when I look back at the entire series, it has a lot of the same positives and a lot of the same negatives. My positives for these movies are, for the most part, that they're very well acted. They're totally believable. I enjoy the editing. I enjoy the color palette. There's this gucky, kind of grimy feel to these movies that I thoroughly enjoy. And I think that this film definitely lines up with all of those. I really enjoy that about these movies. And beyond that, I really thoroughly enjoy the use of practical effects in these films. These kills are so realistic at times, though it's very over the top. It does all look really good. I enjoy the use of practical effects, the blood squibs, all of that jazz. I love that they just went for it and it all is captured on camera for the most part, which just makes these moments creepier, a little bit more gucky, a little bit more yuck. And it's something that I feel really evokes the feeling of cringe or just kind of uncomfortableness while you're watching some of these clips, because they're definitely really intense or just tense in and of themselves. I really thoroughly enjoy the way that they go about the traps and the kills in these movies, because again, on a practical effect level and a performance level, they're almost always really well executed. Now, those are the positives that I could say I have as an overall for this series, but beyond that, as far as a negative goes, I think that the stories just get a little bit jumbled. I think that this series works almost best as a TV series, or almost if you're going to watch it like a TV series. If you were a casual Saw fan just watching each installment as they released year by year, I feel like there would be so much that you would miss, because even myself watching them back to back to back, they interconnect so much and call back to films from years prior in a way that if you don't remember everything, I think that you can't really get the best out of them. Now, most franchises that have a lot of installments, that is the case. You won't really be able to feel the emotional weight and the depth of everything that's happening if you're just hopping in randomly into one random installment, many installments into the franchise. But when you watch a movie like in the Marvel franchise or in the Star Wars franchise, for the most part, though, again, there are elements that you will miss out on because of the fact that you're just jumping in further into the franchise. Those films, for the most part, tend to kind of set up their own story with a beginning, middle, and end, where the characters go through arcs, and, there's a villain that's kind of rising up and it's kind of defeated by the end of the movie. More so with the Marvel movies than with the Star Wars films, but I'm just using those as examples, as movies that you can hop in and you will miss out on things, and there will be that lack of depth 100%. But you're able to still at least enjoy the story that the movie is telling. Whereas with the Saw films, I feel like they're so deeply ingrained within one another, and they're so intertwined, especially later into the franchise, that the main story of the franchise about, these detectives, the Jigsaw serial killer, these main characters that essentially are really established by the time you get to like the fourth film, you do kind of miss out on some of that weight if you are just kind of hopping into a random installment. I couldn't imagine anybody was like, yeah, I'll just start with Saw 6, which again, you really shouldn't do with most series. But yeah, what I really am trying to say here, even though I feel like I'm kind of rambling, is the fact that all of these movies, I feel, very much rely on you having seen the last one and not that long before you're actually watching the one that you're going to watch now, because they're so deeply intertwined, and the films kind of just are made to have a bunch of disposable characters to be in traps while the films slowly start to unfold what's happening with the Jigsaw killer narrative, the whole thing with the detectives and everybody who's involved in the overall narrative across the entire series. It doesn't really have your typical 3-act structure that each movie typically should have to make a solid film. I think that's why a lot of these films have lower ratings, is because they're a little bit messy in the way they choose to tell their story, and the main overarching narrative of the Jigsaw killer and the detectives that are involved and everything that's going on there, it's so built upon throughout the course of the films that it doesn't feel like each film has its own big chapter in telling that story, even though in a way that they do. It just gets a little muddled at times. I have no idea if that made any sense whatsoever, but let's get further into my thoughts on this movie in particular. So this film, once again, we have Costas Mandylor or Mandylor, I don't know how you pronounce his name, who plays Hoffman, coming back as obviously our main character as the Jigsaw killer at this time. Tobin Bell coming back as Jigsaw, John Kramer in the flashbacks, which I always thoroughly enjoy. He's always my favorite part of these movies. I just love his voice. I love the way he plays Jigsaw. He's very creepy, very eerie, and I think without a doubt he's one of the best parts of these movies, if not the best part of these movies. Beyond that, you have people like Mark Rolston coming back as Erikson. You have Betsy Russell coming back as Jill, John Kramer's wife. And yeah, you know, I thoroughly enjoy, for the most part, the main cast of this franchise. I think they're all very good actors. I think that they definitely lean into what this franchise is. And I enjoy the narrative that slowly builds around the detectives and the overall Jigsaw killer storyline. That I can say is definitely one of my positives of this movie. But again, I feel like it's a little jumbled at times, and sometimes you kind of forget what's going on with certain flashbacks, and they try to recontextualize things that I don't think always works. But I would say for the most part, I enjoy that about this movie. That's the part about this movie that I do enjoy. Now, again, the movie in and of itself isn't really about that, and that's kind of where I feel like these films kind of lose their path, because though this film definitely touches on all of that stuff very heavily, the real focus of this movie is the kills and the people in the traps. And similar to the other films in this franchise, they choose to take random kind of disposable characters, throw them into these traps and these situations to give people who are into the Saw movies something to watch, while they slowly build up the main story. It's definitely a different approach to telling a story in a big franchise like this, where every single installment in the franchise, for the most part, especially later into the series, really mainly focuses on disposable characters, while the main characters of the series overall kind of feel almost like side characters in comparison to what's going on. In this movie, we have the character of William, who is this guy who deals with healthcare once again. And at the beginning of the movie, we see that he turned down this guy who literally tells him, "You're killing me," because he's not going to give him the healthcare insurance for a specific procedure that he needs. We end up seeing in a flashback that he actually ended up declining the same kind of thing for experimental procedures for John Kramer, Jigsaw, because of his cancer. And because of this is why William is now our main character who's in the trap. Throughout the course of the film, William has to deal with various people that he works with who are in these traps, and he kind of has to be the one to either save them, sacrifice a little from himself, or just kind of be the one at blame, the one who's at fault for these people dying in these situations. Now, of course, we know that the people who are at fault are really Hoffman and Jigsaw and everybody who's involved with Jigsaw. But yeah, I enjoyed that part of the movie. I gotta say, I really enjoyed seeing the character of William going through the course of this film and having to come across people that he works with, or the people that work under him, and him having to kind of not be this selfish guy that the movie kind of presents him to be, as this kind of health insurance loan guy. I don't know the exact title that he has, and maybe I should have written it down, but I didn't. And yeah, I enjoy that throughout the course of the film. There are some very tense moments and some very tense traps where he has to try to help people through situations, or he has to kind of put his selfishness aside, or he has to make a decision that's going to kill one person versus the next. I really enjoyed all of that. And again, none of that really matters for the overall Saw franchise. You know what I mean? It ties its way into John Kramer and Jigsaw, of course, like these movies always do. But the main, meat and potatoes of the whole series is about Hoffman and Jill and the detective story and the Jigsaw serial killer narrative. And this movie, once again, like a lot of the other films in this franchise, focuses on the people in the traps. And again, those people don't matter, because everybody who's in this movie, who's part of the traps, either die, and if they survive, they are never seen again in the franchise, not one time. But that's not to say I didn't enjoy what William went throughout the course of this film. You know, I think without a doubt the most memorable trap in this film is when he does the whole shotgun carousel thing. I really enjoy that sequence. He has a couple of people who work under him who are on this carousel. They're trapped and there's a shotgun lined up to one of them at a time. And he has to put himself through this pain of being stabbed through the hand to kind of decide who's going to get shot by the shotgun and who's not going to get shot by the shotgun. It's a very tense scene. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. I really enjoy that scene on a performance level, as well as just being a really tense scene with a very interesting trap and kill. And I really enjoy the different things that they come up for this franchise as far as the different traps and kills. And though it sounds like I may have a lot of negatives about the movie, I really do like this one. I think that it's a pretty memorable one in the series. When I look back at the whole series after watching it, I enjoyed seeing this character who was, you know, pretty selfish and pretty much all about himself, kind of being put in a situation where now he has to put others above himself and sacrifice a lot of himself to get through these situations. But I think my biggest negative as somebody who, you know, tries to be fair about critiquing films is that this movie doesn't tell a narrative that I feel really ties into the story of the overall Saw franchise as much as it could. You know, like there is that stuff throughout the course of the film. You know, we do learn more about Jill's involvement with Jigsaw and you know, John Kramer and everything that was involved there. We do see more about Amanda and Hoffman working together behind the scenes and them bickering as they were kind of working with Jigsaw near the end of his life, and how certain events tie into the other films. You know, we see Hoffman was blackmailing Amanda because of the fact that she was around with Cecil when Jill and John Kramer lost their baby, due to Cecil kind of slamming the door into Jill. Yeah, you know, I really enjoyed all the way that they kind of recontextualized certain scenes, kind of gave us a different outlook on certain flashbacks, kind of panning the camera back a little bit more, showing us a little bit more. Thought that was cool. I really enjoy the way that they expand the narrative around John Kramer and these characters that are part of the Saw franchise. I just think that even like if you're listening to this and you aren't a fan of the franchise, or maybe you even are, I just think that these movies just get so jumbled and they don't tell their own story. I think they really focused with these films mainly being about Hoffman and Jill and John Kramer and Amanda, these different various characters who are big parts of the story that we're constantly getting flashbacks about, rather than giving us just a bunch of disposable characters for the sake of traps and gore. I think without a doubt it could have made these movies a lot stronger and probably have been a lot better reviewed by critics. Now, I do enjoy this film and enjoy this franchise overall, but it's almost kind of like a guilty pleasure thing for me, where I am able to recognize that the films in and of themselves don't tell a cohesive beginning, middle, and end narrative. And I do like the way that they kind of expand the narrative over the course of the films, but watching this movie and just looking at the franchise as a whole, I just feel like by this point it got a little messy. But I do enjoy the traps. I enjoy William's journey throughout the course of the film and him having to kind of, you know, come to terms with who he's been. At the end of the film, we think that he's trying to get his way to his family, who seems to be this mom and this son that are also part of this trap. And when he gets there at the end, we end up seeing that it's this other blonde woman that was in an opposite cage from this family. And that's when we end up finding out that that's the family that he was trying to get to as his sister, and that the mom and son that were in the other cage were the family of the man who was asking for healthcare insurance from William at the beginning of the film. And now they have the opportunity to kill William, and they end up killing William. And so again, it's one of those things where I enjoy the whole narrative of William, and I enjoy his journey and the tension of all these scenes, and I enjoy how good as far as a horror element that those things are. But I just feel like at the end of the day, it's a bunch of disposable characters in a disposable situation. And by the next movie, none of them really matter. And all of this stuff about Hoffman and Jill and all these people that are part of the Jigsaw narrative with John Kramer and all that, they're kind of just a smaller piece to the narrative of this entire film. And I think how they just focus on that a little bit more, rather than really focusing on the kills and people having to be in traps and all that jazz, I feel like it just could have made for stronger films across the entire franchise. That's just a criticism I have of the franchise overall. I just feel like they wanted to give everybody traps and all these things that the franchise kind of became known for, and the main narrative kind of gets a little sidelined, you know? And again, I feel like I'm almost coming across more negative than positive. There's a lot about this film on a practical level, the way it's shot, the way it's directed, that I really do enjoy. There's a lot of really tense scenes that I feel evoke the emotion they definitely wanted you to feel, and all of that I really thoroughly enjoy. I just feel like I wanted to see more of the Hoffman storyline. There is some really cool stuff that develops here. We do see, I mean, I'm kind of jumping around, but we do see that Agent Perez, who we believe died in the last film, was really alive, but she ends up dying in this film, as well as the character of Erikson, when they end up deciphering the voice that, sounds like Jigsaw, and kind of finding out that it is actually Hoffman. Hoffman's there when they're deciphering the voice, and he ends up slicing Erikson's throat. He ends up using this other woman that's in there as like a body shield when he's being shot at, and then he ends up stabbing Agent Perez multiple times. So there is some cool stuff that definitely develops in the narrative, and then the way the movie ends is really, really cool. It gets you excited to watch the next installment, which is where Hoffman is put into the bear trap from the first film by Jill, the wife or the ex-wife of John Kramer, and he ends up surviving it by sticking his head into some bars that stop the bear trap from fully blowing his head wide open. He ends up pulling his head out, and we see that half of his cheek is completely demolished, and then he ends up screaming to the top of his lungs. The movie ends, and then there's a random post-credit scene that kind of connects to an older film, but really doesn't go anywhere in the future, so it doesn't really matter. And yeah, that's my thoughts on Saw 6. A jumbled mess compared to some of the other films in the franchise that has a lot to talk about, and there's a lot about it that I really enjoy, and I think it's one of the more memorable films in the franchise with some of the more memorable kills and traps. But I think for the most part, my biggest issue with it is kind of one of the issues I have with a lot of films in this franchise, is the fact that there's just so much going on that isn't part of the main storyline with the Jigsaw killer, Mark Hoffman, and everything else that's going on. Between flashback, present day, and the random disposable characters in the disposable situation just for the sake of giving the audience traps and kills, I can't help but feel like I would have rather them focus more on Hoffman in that narrative, because I found myself more engaged in those things. And when the movie ends with Hoffman almost dying in this trap, I was excited to see what was next, but mainly because we just spent time with that situation that I was more interested in. I hope everything I've said has made some sense, whether you disagree with me or not, but I definitely want to hear what you guys have to say. So, do you like this movie? Do you not like this movie? Where does this rank for you in the Saw franchise? Do you find this to be one of the more memorable ones in the series like I do? Definitely want to hear what you guys have to say. On an overall level, I can say that this is kind of a guilty pleasure franchise for me, that I recognize its flaws, but I think there's a lot of positives that people don't give credit for. So, that's going to be my thoughts on Saw 6. Comment your thoughts, hit that like button, subscribe for more videos, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.